When I was studying Japanese at UCLA, the 1946 book, The Chrysanthemum and the Sword, was required reading. This is a book that came out when my mother was college age. In it, anthropologist Ruth Benedict gives her analyses of Japanese culture based on interviews she did for the U.S. Office of War Information. The book influenced how people in the U.S. understood Japanese culture, particularly during the U.S. occupation of Japan. C. Douglas Lummis, in a July 12, 2007 article, wrote some criticism of Benedict's analyses of the Japanese culture. He notes, in its tendency to treat Japan as an absolute other and to explain the complexities of this state-run industrial society with a small number of generalizations about its culture, The Chrysanthemum and the Sword qualifies as a work of what Edward Said labeled Orientalism. However, while Said analyzed Western stereotypes as they appeared under the gaze of Europe facing east, Chrysanthemum represents an Orientalism as it appeared under the gaze of America facing west. Its view of the Japanese as the most alien of peoples, inscrutable to the Western mind until unlocked by the ethnographer's magic, opposed to and incompatible with the West, had deep roots in the encounter between Asia and that section of Western civilization that reached the eastern shores of the Pacific Ocean in the late 19th century. Benedict also wrote about Germany. From Lummis's point of view, the two works could not be more different. In Germany, Nazism is a recently cobbled together ideology. In Japan, totalitarian militarism is just Japan. The Chrysanthemum and the Sword established the cultural paradigm for the post-war U.S.-Japan relations. It depicted/invented Japan as a country the most appropriate for the U.S. to have defeated and occupied. Lummis notes that the core of her observations in The Chrysanthemum and the Sword come from Robert Hashima. The name should give away the problem. Hashima was born in the U.S. and taken to Japan when he was 13 in 1932. He returned to the U.S. in 1941 and was then sent to a concentration camp. I believe it was Manzanar in California. There he met anthropologist John Embry, who got him a job for the Office of War. He met Benedict in that capacity in Washington, D.C. Hashima was not Benedict's only informant, but it seems, according to Lummis, that he became a kind of touchstone, an authority against which she would test information from other sources. Ruth Benedict had never been to Japan. She did not speak Japanese. Her analyses were research at a distance. She did champion human equality, writing the pamphlet The Races of Mankind with her colleague Jean Weltfish. But her analyses ignore the centuries of Japan not seeking to conquer other nations and the centuries of isolation. It also ignores the influence of Western culture on Japan. Imperialist Japan was a nation attempting to modernize using countries like the UK and Germany as examples. And there is the matter of race. Benedict was a white woman in academia at a time when few women were, but she was still white, and she still had white privilege. Lummis has the benefit of speaking Japanese, having lived in Japan, but he is also a white person with white male privilege. When analyzing the interviews, I wondered if Benedict was able to conceive what it was like to be an immigrant to a hostile nation. Benedict had briefly been in Los Angeles, But was she aware of the level of animosity targeting East Asians in California? Did she understand what it was to be a minority? And did she understand how immigrants were different from the general population of their home country? Most Japanese did not seek to live abroad like the Issei. Most of the Issei were not the firstborn sons with the inherited family wealth and attached responsibilities. The Nisei were born in the U.S. with Japanese spoken at home, but not in their schools. The Kibei Nisei, those U.S.-born Japanese Americans who returned to Japan, were different still. Robert Hashima was a Kibei Nisei. Some of my relatives are also Kibei Nisei. Unlike Hashima, my Kibei Nisei relatives spent World War II in Japan and not incarcerated. And yet, some of them were never considered Japanese enough by the Japanese, just as some Nisei were not considered American enough in the United States by some of their fellow citizens. It was the inability of the U.S. government to allow East Asians to naturalize, the very repugnance to have East Asians become citizens, and then the inability to differentiate between Japanese nationals and those U.S. citizens of Japanese descent that allowed for the largest single forced migration in U.S. history to take place, where over 120,000 people were incarcerated without due process.